We're here in New York City where, I don't know if you can hear it picked up on the microphones, but there are helicopters buzzing overhead as protesters are now downtown around Washington Square Park. They are now saying, count every vote counts. They've also got banners about ending capitalism and all sorts of other sorts of left-wing nonsense that they're pushing. But it's all about now trying to delegitimize the Trump presidency before he even manages to take to the courts. We've seen the Trump administration file court challenges in, I think, Pennsylvania and Michigan against their counting processes. And we're now starting to see some real questions being asked about the processes that are underway. You know, in Wisconsin, for example, which Trump held, they're now showing a 90% turnout rate, which is much higher than they've ever had. And given the fact that the largest city in the state, Milwaukee, had only an 83% turnout on the election, a lot of people are now starting to do the numbers and wonder if such a high turnout, such a high receipt of ballots is even mathematically possible. So I heard Joe Hockey's comments before and some of the other talk about it, but I think there is more questions to be asked about this, don't you, Rita?
Oh, absolutely, and all sorts of questions also asked about the process of not allowing poll watchers to actually watch the poll, which is what their role is supposed to be. Some states have been required to be 30 feet away from the process, some up to 100 feet away. And at that distance, obviously, you can't observe the signature to see if it's matching. You can't see if the ballot has been filled out correctly. So there's all sorts of different issues that they've raised that I think they're going to seek recourse on. And of course, we've spoken about Pennsylvania and the madness there, where you can count ballots that arrive after the polls close, even if they're not postmarked clearly, so you can't be sure they were posted whilst the polls were open.
And meanwhile, there's some other news out of Arizona that apparently, due to a counting error, it wasn't 98% of the vote that's been turned in, but 86%, which means that the count going on there is still very much alive, as are those 11 electoral votes.
Georgia, though, we might get 3 a.m. our time. We may get the final count there. And if Biden can secure Georgia, then it's pretty much all over as far as reaching 270 goes.
If Arizona doesn't come back to Trump.
Of course.
Yeah, so that's right. Arizona at the moment has narrowed in recent times, James and Rita, but that Georgia question's an interesting one as those numbers continue to come in. What do you make of that? Because if you look at the history, it's not since 1960 we've seen a president make it to the White House without Ohio. At that time, JFK won Texas. This time, Biden might do it with Georgia.
Well, this is a historic election on a number of fronts. The voter turnout, the ridiculous number of mail-in votes, and if you're talking about the historical nature of it, also the enormous increase in the minority vote for Donald Trump. That's something I think we haven't spoken enough about. The fact that a man that's been maligned as a racist, a sexist, a homophobe has significantly increased his vote amongst gay voters, amongst Hispanic voters, black voters, both male and female black voters. So that's something that I think, again, needs a little bit of scrutiny about how that happened. This is the highest non-white vote that a Republican candidate has got since 1960.
And in fact, actually, you know, he received among African-American males 18% of the vote, which may not sound like a lot, but historically, Republican candidates barely struggled to break 10% of that vote. So Donald Trump effectively doubled the African-American male vote for the Republicans, for him, in this election. That's really historic, and it's interesting too, Rita, that the one group of people who Trump went down with most was white males. So we've heard for so long Trump is a creature of, you know, the angry white male, the patriarchy, all of these horrible things that, you know, we've been told to hate on by all the sort of the cultural, intersectional, critical race theory people. But actually, Trump is now building, fascinatingly, almost a rainbow coalition on the right. And it's such an interesting realignment because, you know, as Rita and I drove around Pennsylvania and parts of this country over the past week or so, we really did notice that it was in the poorer parts of town. It was amongst, those places where the houses were more modest that all the Trump signs were out. And it was only when you got to the big end of town that people were voting Democrat. This is just the further evidence of a shift that's been happening over the last 40 years, where the Democrats of the party of the rich and the professionals and the Republicans are now representing that constituency which the Democrats have left behind.